First, I want to thank Mark for organizing all the songs from Psalms. It just makes sense when the lesson is from Psalms. One correction, Mark, is it's not Tom's lesson, it's God's lesson. I'm just delivering the message. So, lessons from Psalms starts, first I'm going to do a quick overview about Psalms. God gave King David a really good team. It was not a one-person project. And so God established Levites to work with the chosen people, to be their spiritual leaders. And within the family of Levites, there were musicians, which were also called Ashavites. There were gatekeepers, temple officials, and prophets. And in the Old Testament, the prophets were called seers. So there was a team that helped David compile, compose, and sing and perform the Psalms in all of the royal pageants, worship, all of those things. This team helped King David do that. So I'm going to highlight two of the people in the team. One was Heman, and he was Samuel's grandson, and he was the author of Psalm 88, and his name appears in the Bible 16 times, and he became King David's personal prophet or personal seer. So, pretty important guy. He was Samuel's grandson. So again, we talk about the roots of the men and the history that's brought into Psalms. This is a long-running family history of serving God. The second is Asaph. He was also a Levite, a singer. He had 12 Psalms, number 50 and number 73 through 83. He was a temple singer. Asaph, of course, kind of matches up with an Asaphite. Now, what I don't know is when Asaph was born and his parents were naming him, did they name him after a group that already existed, the singers, the Asaphites, or did David, as he grew up, do such a good job that they became, and all the singers became Asavites? I messed that one up. Anyhow, I don't know the answer to that, but it is curious. I did a lesson some time ago on Asaph, and Paula mentioned that in Nehemiah 12:46, it talks about the days of David and Asaph. So Asaph is even mentioned in the Bible other places right next to King David. So I think he was really an important person. Now, what's so important about these men is that they witnessed the things that are written about in many of the Psalms. For example, they witnessed King David leaping and dancing before God. David was really a favorite of God. God loved him, and he had so much energy and so much love that he broke the norm. Can you imagine? I have a broken leg, so I couldn't do it, but if I had a good leg, that I came dancing down the aisle to preach. It's just out of the acceptable range, and yet he did this, and these men witnessed this. And that's recorded in 2 Samuel 6:16. That's the same Samuel that Heman was related to. So there's great depth in the writing of the Psalms. Now, these men watched and lived through the ups and downs of the chosen people's relationship with God. And it was a hilly ride. They were real godly, and then they went to pagan, and they went back to real godly. And so these men witnessed this. Now, the point of this is the Psalms are a history, not a story. And it's a history that these men who helped David write it, and of course David had a long history getting to being king. So these are all firsthand witness accounts. And so we've really, and I'm guilty of this, when our kids were little, we told them Bible stories. The Bible is not stories. The Bible is living history, and these people witnessed that. So one of the nice things, because of the Levites and the depth of this, is that many Psalms end in praising God. They're not just stories with a happy ending, but they specifically praise God. So it gives the book of Psalms great credibility. Now I'm going to do just an overview of what Tom thinks the Psalms, how the Psalms are written. First, it's a very honest collection of historical events. Sometimes it's brutally honest. Sometimes it is so candid that there is no political correctness. You have to realize that in Solomon's time, the Queen of Sheba and a whole caravan came and invaded Jerusalem. And so the politically correct thing would have been to downplay our God. But that didn't happen. And the singers and the psalms that they sang showed those guests what our God was really all about. I think if you slow down when you read Psalms, sometimes we read the Bible pretty quick. We said, I'm going to read 4 chapters tonight, so we blew through it to get the 4 chapters done. If you really put it on slow, you will find that there's a lot of emotion in the book of Psalms. And you have to share that emotion to enjoy the book of Psalms. Now, of course, King David was fleeing from Saul, and that was warfare, and that warfare lasted probably 7 years. What was that warfare like? Well, David did not defend a fort or a castle or a building. David's warrior experience was guerrilla warfare. God gave David 600 mighty men. The Bible calls them mighty men. And they dealt with the king's 3,000 men who were trying to catch him and kill him, and they never did catch him and kill him. So God gave him exactly what he needed. But there's many Bible stories where God didn't use a huge army to bring a victory. So this is not surprising. And yet, mixed in with guerrilla warfare is a great deal of compassion. So Psalms is really an exciting book to read, not only because each psalm is a musical song, but it's a story of God's relationship with people. And it gives you a really good view of the day-to-day life of the chosen people. It was not a dull life if you were a little kid growing up during King David's life and reign. It just was really, really busy times. So if I'm to bring this to a close, Psalms is a book about passion, spiritual tension, and decisions. Matter of fact, the whole Bible is a book of decisions. And that's where we come into the picture. God gives us information, shows us love, but we have to make a decision to follow God's wishes. So the whole lesson is going to focus on decisions, and the decisions are between good and evil. And it really worries us and me sometimes because anything that's not good is evil. There is no gray. It's not like it's a little bad. It's either godly or it's ungodly. And so it's just really makes us think. So I'm going to read to you Psalm 22, verse 1. Really thin pages here. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry out day by day, but you do not answer. By night, and am not silent. So you might wonder why I read that so loud and emphatically. And the instructions here are, he cried out. It has annoyed me all of my church life when someone reads something passionate out of the Bible as flat and low and whispering, and they take all the importance out of this. David was fleeing for his life and fighting for his life. And so this is really, really passionate. Now I'm going to move on to Matthew 27. And this is going to have in it some Arabic that I don't speak, so you have to bear with me here. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Aili luma sabachthani, Aili lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, the importance here is the connection that David said that, and a long time after that, these are the words that Jesus spoke on the cross. As he was dying, what was happening? It's not so much that he was dying, that was awful, but he was taking on the sins of the whole world. And so that's why he cried out, my God, because this was a burden that had never, ever been dealt with before. So it's a really good opportunity to connect Old Testament and New Testament. In a book of Psalms by a guy named A.F. Kirkpatrick, he says that Psalms is quoted or referenced 93 times in the New Testament. And so on this note paper at the very bottom, I have that information for you if you want to double check that. And it's from the Cambridge University Press, and it's backed with cross references. So Mark is now going to lead us in singing the 23rd Psalm. The song we just sang can be thought of almost as a prayer, but it's also a song. I think it's also a great teaching tool. I think all of the Psalms are great teaching tools. And I'm going to make that point because back in those days, they chanted. Music didn't even have notes back then. So they chanted the Psalms. And so I'm going to read just a little bit of Psalm 23. I tried, I zoomed in and got chanting, and I thought, nah, that ain't going to work. So I'm going to read it at a pace that would be a chant. The Lord is my shepherd, comma. I shall not be in want, comma. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, comma. He leads me beside quiet waters. So as they were chanting that, they sang it much slower. And the reason I believe that is true is that the people were illiterate. Now, if you think about literacy and you think about reading, and you ask your kids about the reading comprehension tests that they do at school, which says, oh, Johnny reads on an 8th grade level, or whatever the case might be, they have to take key words in the sentence and then the following sentence, and they have to combine those and process them. And so that's comprehension. Well, when you can't read, then comprehension becomes much more difficult. So in chanting, God broke down the singing of the psalm into short segments that the illiterate people could begin to understand. And then there came the case of other people visiting Solomon or King David from other nations. And for example, the Queen of Sheba showed up with a whole mass of people, and they weren't Hebrew. So as she was welcomed into the court of David with all his pomp and circumstance and songs, they learned about our God. And so I think that Psalms is a very educational. So just for interest, think about what other competing religions and philosophies were budding at the same time that King David and King Solomon were alive. And the answer is Confucius, Plato, Socrates, Buddha. All of these other religions were starting up. And so the Psalms were a way of, at least at some level, letting these people know that there was a true, real, living God. And so I find that it's interesting to find out what's going on in the rest of the world. So our first lesson, there's 3 lessons, so now you can take notes. Number 1 is in Psalm 5. Verse 3, and this is David. In the morning, O Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you and wait in expectation. So King David started his day. He's running for his life with 600 guerrilla fighters, and he starts his day with a prayer. When I built the addition, I came here before anybody else, and I started my day praying for the workers' safety and for a good project. So it is definitely a valuable concept. Now, I'm going to move on to Matthew 21. You know what? I don't want Matthew 21, I want Mark 1. I'm ahead of myself. Very early, and this is Jesus, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. So again, there's a connection between David getting up early and praying, and Jesus getting up early and praying. So, praying, I believe, pleases God. I believe it's a great way to start your day. Isn't it great when you wake up and open your eyes and the first person you talk to is God? What a powerful way to listen to God, to talk to God, to become motivated and start your new day in a very positive way. But waking up and praying the first thing is a decision. And it is a decision that's kind of easy to forget. So our first lesson is to start your day in prayer. Our second lesson is from Matthew 21 and Psalm 118. It's about the cornerstone. Now, stones can be large or small, and stones can be good or bad. Many of you have desert lawn, and you have stones so that you don't have to water your grass and mow your grass. So in that case, those stones are good. If you're driving down the freeway and one comes off the tire in the car in front of you and cracks your windshield, that's a bad stone. But we're not talking about good and bad stones. We're talking about people. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a story that my wife has never heard about in my life. I was a school teacher. I taught for 33 years. The teachers had a lunchroom, long row of tables, just the 8-foot tables in a row, about 40 teachers at the table, facing each other. That was an interesting process. I was a young teacher, and at one end, there was a group that didn't eat. They played hearts. They wanted to get mentally out of the classroom. So I don't know if they only ate 2 meals a day or if they munched in between class, but they just played cards. But there was just a diverse bunch of conversations. There was 40 people, only 8 men. And so some of the men, the noisier of the men, were avid fishermen. And so the men's conversation was fish stories every lunchtime. So I happened to be sitting beside a young man my same age, and across was a young woman the same age. And the best I could tell, they didn't know each other. But I started to eavesdrop on their conversation while looking like I was paying attention to my food. And it started with the lady mentioning that she was not happily married. And pretty soon the man said, well, I'm not happily married. And so they were counseling each other. And the next day, the subject picked right up. I mean, they hadn't forgotten this. They didn't think, no, I'll keep this to myself. They wanted to talk it out. And so eventually, in a couple days, I noticed that there was a tear running down her face as she was telling her woes. And the man reached over and held her hand. And I thought, being a young person, a young Christian, how kind to give her compassion and showing her that you were listening. How kind that you would do that. The next day, they were holding hands again. And the next day, they were holding hands again. The next week, they moved way down at the end of the row where there was nobody. And then now they were whispering. And so it went into full-fledged adultery pretty quick. something small, holding a hand. It's a good deed to hold someone's hand when they're in trouble. What went wrong? Well, I learned that even a good deed without God's presence can go very wrong. And so I count this experience, this observation, as one of the reasons that I have just celebrated 55 years of marriage. I learned, God exposed to me Satan's trap between men and women who are married. And it taught me to do a better job of keeping that boundary or that distance. And so I credit that for my many years of marriage, my many years of happy marriage. Back to our lesson. Let's go to Matthew 21. Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scripture, the stone that the builders rejected has become the capstone? The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes." So we're now going back. Our second lesson is about the stone, the capstone. And then in Psalms 118, verse 18, the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So you see, again, we're tying together the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so we're going to talk about the important stone, the stone that God was thinking about. So who is our cornerstone? Okay, let's say it out loud all together. Jesus is our cornerstone. Jesus is our cornerstone. Okay. Then, the next question is, who's the other stone? Well, it says right here, the stone which the builder refused or rejected is become the head stone. So both stones are Jesus. Jesus as a rejected, and Jesus as a Savior. So, how does this connect to us? How does the cornerstone, or the rejected stone, the people that throw Jesus under the bus and don't believe, how does that apply to us? Well, when I came here to Camelback 40 years ago, on a slow Sunday, we had 350 people in this room. On a good Sunday, we had 400. We had 150 in Sunday school. The adult Sunday school took up many rooms down the hall to accommodate those people. Today, we have 80, maybe 90 on a good Sunday. Now, the good news is that many of these people have gone to paradise. They have passed on. We have lost a lot of members in that 40 years. But many have snuck out that door, the back door. They have silently and passively just disappeared from worship, golf, boating, camping, whatever they do, and they have rejected the stone. Because it is so important that part of worship is our togetherness and our fellowship. You cannot fish and call it worship because it's relaxing. So Satan makes sure there will always be spiritual tension. And therefore, there will always be decisions to make. Satan guarantees that because he thinks he can influence our decisions. And one of the things that Satan has done, and everybody that's a parent knows this, is human nature is to reject advice. Raise kids, raise teenagers, and their specialty is to reject advice. The couple that were in adultery were rejecting advice. They didn't go get professional counselors. It was the blind leading the blind, counseling each other, and woe me, woe you, we can do better. So it's just a battle. We cannot diminish the importance of Satan. So our third lesson, if you're taking notes, I want you to write 2 words in that line: application and decision. In space 3, that's it. That's the lesson. The lesson really is homework. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Well, I'm going to suggest what to do, but I can't make you do what I suggest. Your assignment is to marry lesson 1, start your day talking to God, with lesson 2, which is to talk to God about, and I'm going to focus on the little stone. So I suggest you talk to God about that little error you made that 99% of the world would say, that's nothing. But we know that it's an error according to God's plan. Or we might call it a blunder and kind of make it soft. Or, oh, I just omitted that. I didn't lie, I just didn't tell the truth. Or we would call it a slip of the tongue. And so the idea is that you wake up tomorrow morning, first thing you do is talk to God, and you talk to God and share your emotions, your heart and soul with God. Look into your heart and talk to God about what is in your heart. So, if you're today in a state of spiritual tension, if you've come to that conclusion, Mark and I have 2 suggestions on how to fix that. The first is you are invited to come forward as we sing our next song. We call it an invitation, and come for the prayers of the elders. Or if you're shy, I'll be at the back door and you give me a note. And on the note, be sure to write whether it's a private or public prayer, and then we'll pray for you. The lesson is yours. I hope you enjoyed the lesson on Psalms and have taken it seriously, and wake up tomorrow talking to God. Thank you.